This woman just found out that her 43-year-old husband is cheating on her with an 18-year-old boy. I am a 37-year-old woman, and my husband, who is 43, is cheating on me with an 18-year-old boy. What do I do next? I'm in my late 30s, he is in his early 40s. We've been married for almost 10 years. No kids. In the last year, he came out as bisexual, but not by choice. I caught him talking to men on Grindr. He swore he never physically cheated and was just exploring fantasies that he'd never had the chance to explore. We went through a significant rough patch, but ultimately I decided to give him another chance. Several months ago, he asked if I would consider an open relationship to allow him to experiment with a man. I said that wasn't something I could ever be comfortable with, and if he needs to do this, then the only option is to separate. I've tried to be patient and understanding. He said he didn't need it, and I should forget he even asked. Since the Grindr incident, I have not fully trusted him, and I admit I looked at his phone without permission. He's been texting an 18-year-old young man for well over a month. The messages are sexual, and he, my husband, is very overtly asking for more. I don't know if anything has happened in person. This is not a young man he met online, at work, or at a bar. That would still be horrifying to me, but at least slightly more acceptable. He is our close mutual friend's foster son, who we've known for years. I was aware he was gay, but I never would have dreamed this would happen. He is a child to me. I admit that at first I was angry with the young man, but I understand he is young and vulnerable, and it's my husband who is in the wrong. From the messages I saw, he was not encouraging this, and some of his responses to my husband seemed uncomfortable. I can't blame him. I've not yet spoken to my husband. I don't know what to say. He knows something is up because he's being overly considerate and attentive. I know I need to leave. I couldn't ever feel the same about him after this. I don't know if I should say anything to the young man or his foster parents. To be very clear, this relationship is over, but I need advice about how to approach it. Alright, so let me get this straight. Your husband has groomed a child that you both knew and now is trying to get into a sexual relationship with him. That is crazy. However, before I give my own personal thoughts, there are a couple of updates, starting with this. I'm currently staying with a friend while I figure out my next steps, and I've been making a start on getting legal and financial advice in place. I've not yet spoken to my husband. He seems to have realized that something is up because he is being much nicer and trying to engage much more than usual, but staying with a friend for a few days is not terribly unusual for me in itself. I've not yet spoken to the 18-year-old and or his foster parents. I'm still trying to figure out the best approach, but I've received some helpful advice from this post which I will keep in mind. I don't imagine any of this will be resolved anytime soon, but I expect the coming weeks to be extremely difficult. And we also have one more further update. I've spoken to the young man's foster parents and briefly to him. Some information came to light that stressed the urgency and led me to believe it would be safer and more helpful to speak to them first, despite him being over 18. I don't have the time or energy to explain exactly what happened, and of course it wouldn't be appropriate to share a lot of detail. The situation is even more complicated and upsetting than I realized, and my husband is entirely at fault. The young man is safe, more or less, and my husband's behavior is no longer hidden from his carers. I'm in the early stages of determining my next steps regarding separating from my husband, and I'm receiving specialist advice about this. Yeah, I can't overstate the fact that what's happened here is clearly very, very disgusting. This boy has been groomed by your husband, or hopefully ex-husband, very, very soon, for I don't know how many years. A lot, probably. Your husband has then most likely waited until he's 18 before exploring his sexual fantasies with a child that he's groomed. I mean, that is literally what's happened here, right? Get in the comments down below. Let me know. Am I wrong? Have I misinterpreted something? I don't think I have. My word. The good news now, at least, is that people know what's gone on here. That is all I can say. That is the only silver lining. But my word. I mean, this kid's life is probably ruined. Let's be honest. The trauma that he's gone through, just insane. I don't know if any level of therapy will help bring him back to some form of normality. Just so sad and tragic. And your ex-husband, well, husband, needs to go to prison for this. Now for our next post from Relationship Advice. My husband, who is 30, and I, a 28-year-old woman, opened our relationship, and now everything is terrible. There's also a great update in this story as well. My husband and I have been married for 6 years, together for 8. My husband, I'll call him Eric, has always been a really intense person, but he's a good man. When we got together, I noticed he had a much higher sex drive than I did. But I'd usually have sex with him when I wasn't in the mood anyway because I love him. He's never vocalized any problems until somewhat recently. I should also mention, just before we got married, we talked about having kids. I'm indifferent to kids, whereas he doesn't want them, so we agreed not to have them. Over the last year, my sex drive has been almost non-existent. I've been checked by doctors, and they say that nothing is wrong physically, but I should talk to a therapist, which I haven't done yet. I haven't even been able to just have sex with him to have sex, like I was doing. About 4 months ago, he sat me down and we talked about all this, and he said he needs sex, which I told him I understood, but I can't give that to him right now. We argued for a bit, and he ended up sleeping on the couch. In the morning, he suggested we open the relationship. I was heartbroken. He explained that we either give this a try or end our relationship. So I agreed. We set boundaries. No bringing the person to our house ever, no talking about it, always use protection, and regularly get tested. He agreed to all of this. I was actually surprised how okay I was with this as the months moved along. Even when he'd text me that he's going to be late, or when he'd kiss me and tell me he has plans that night, it almost felt like a burden was lifted from me. Well, yesterday my husband sat me down again and said he has something really difficult to tell me. For the last couple of months, he's been seeing this one girl and she's pregnant. I think I dissociated a little because I heard him talking but couldn't understand the words he was saying. When I came back to reality, I asked if it was his and is she keeping it? Yes and yes. And he plans on being in this child's life actively. I asked him who she was, and he told me. It's someone I know. Not well, but I do know who she is. I'm utterly heartbroken. I haven't told family or friends yet, and I asked him not to. I asked him if he wants a divorce, and he didn't say no. He's basically leaving it up to me. So I guess my question is, do I cut my losses and move on, or give this marriage another try? Well, from my perspective, the answer is pretty obvious. This needs to end immediately. But, of course, get your own opinions in the comments down below. I want to hear what you think, guys. But for now, here is the updates. We're getting a divorce. Well, personally, I would say that's fantastic news. I mean, not fantastic, but you get my point. That is the correct decision. He came home yesterday afternoon and we had a long, very emotional talk. I asked him questions that I never asked when he told me she was pregnant. He admitted to not using protection. He says he never slept with her before we opened the relationship, but he did kiss her. He said she's the only one he slept with. He said the night before he gave me the open or divorce ultimatum when we argued about sex was a last-ditch effort to get me to work on things. He admitted that he should have just asked for a divorce instead of asking to open the relationship. He also said that I share some blame in this marriage falling apart, which I agree with. I asked him if he remembers if I was always like this. He said in the first 1 to 3 years of our relationship, I was enthusiastic about having sex, even if my sex drive was low. He admitted he hasn't been in love with me for a while and that he's in love with this other woman. I asked why he suddenly wants kids. He said he's slowly changed his mind about kids over the years, but never said anything because our relationship has been so broken that it wouldn't have mattered. He thinks I didn't go into therapy because of my parents. They're very conservative and religious and believe if you pray hard enough, God will give you the answer. And he thinks I subconsciously have an aversion to therapy because of them. I asked him, if he hasn't been in love with me for a while, why not divorce me when he realized that? He told me he loves me, and he was in love with me once and he wanted to make his marriage work, but when he kissed her, he realized it was probably too late. But he said there was a part of him that didn't want to leave me. He never expected to fall in love with her. He asked me if I was still in love with him, and I said I didn't know. He said that probably means no. We agreed a divorce is the best thing we can do for ourselves and each other. We also agreed to make the divorce as painless as possible. I want to sell the house. He agreed and said he'll move out in the meantime. He said whatever he doesn't take with him, I can keep or sell. We didn't talk about alimony or anything. I'll let my lawyer and his lawyer deal with that, but I'm not sure I'm entitled to it since I work a decent job. And from what I've read, in my state that might be enough for a judge to say no. I feel pretty numb right now. I don't think I have the energy to cry anymore. I still haven't told anyone. He said he'll wait to tell people until we get lawyers involved because it's going to be a mess with family and friends once they find out. Anyway, that's all. He's gone and I'm lying in bed still processing everything. Surprisingly, I don't hate him. I'm not mad. I made a promise to myself to contact a therapist on Monday, and I'm holding myself to that this time. I want to thank everyone for the advice, as harsh as some of it was. Okay, solid resolution. It's good that you've taken the advice of Redditors and realized that yes, you need to get out of this relationship. Ultimately, pretty sad story, right? It just wasn't working for either of you. Your husband's acted truly awfully by going against his own word and, saying that you'll use protection and then not using protection, then getting someone pregnant, and after all the chat about you not wanting kids or being indifferent, then saying, no, we're going to keep the child and I'm going to be in that person's life. It's not adding up. Now, eventually we've understood that, yeah, you guys clearly just aren't really in love anymore, but still, just be honest. Don't go for all this length of saying, oh yeah, let's have an open relationship where, by the way, I'm just going to be with one person who I'm falling in love with. That's not really what an open relationship is. And then going to have a child with them as well. Like, just be a man and just get a divorce off the bat. As you said you should have done. Well, if you were brave enough and a good person, you would have done. Nothing wrong, by the way, with falling out of love with someone. It happens. I think that to expect to be in an amazing love and relationship with someone for 50 plus years, your entire period together, married, is perhaps a little bit far-fetched. I don't know, of course, for a lot of people, it is like that, and that's brilliant. That's what everyone aspires to have. But is that realistic? For a lot of people, it isn't. That's why divorces happen, and that's why there's quite a high rate of divorce. Divorces are fine, they're part of life. This is not. This is disgusting. My boyfriend didn't want to pay $200 to save my life. I was at a bar with my boyfriend and his friends a while ago. We all had a great time, dancing on tables, singing and drinking. I remember feeling totally fine 1 second, and the next I got very unsteady, and I lost connection with my body. I got confused and scared, but then just so calm. It was all types of weird. There are seconds here and there I remember, but most things that happened don't exist in my memory. I became unconscious, and according to my boyfriend, the few times I opened my eyes, they looked very scared. He was told to get a taxi and get me to the emergency room fast. He managed to get me into the taxi and it started to drive. My boyfriend told me that during the drive, the driver told him that he would have to pay $200 extra if I threw up. Then my boyfriend said, F no, stop the driver. I wanted to walk to the emergency room. I was still unconscious and he didn't know why or if my life was at risk. Luckily for him, the police were driving around and saw me laying on the ground. They asked him what's up and drove us to the emergency room with blue lights on and fast. They took it very seriously, and without them, my boyfriend would have been lucky to even get me to the emergency room. Turns out I got drugged that night. It got worse, as he forced me to walk with shaky legs from the emergency room the day after. A walk that should have been 20 minutes took me 2 hours. He even started talking about the fact that he could have gotten drugged too, and that maybe he got a little drugged, even though he didn't feel weird at all that night. Then he started to talk about him paying the taxi $40 for the little drive and how much that was, like he wanted me to pay him back or something. He constantly stated that it was $40 and how sick that was. That's the normal price around here. He looked up symptoms related to being drugged and found that long-term symptoms would mostly be trauma. The next weekend, I had to be with his friends again and some people I didn't know. They talked about that night and even joked a little around me being drugged. Not a lot, but I felt awful. He also ignored me once when I said someone was following me. He was never scared of letting me walk around in town at night, but if a female friend did it, then he would have to follow her. He argues with me when I'm scared instead of making me feel better or protecting me. Other than that, he's a kind man that doesn't want to hurt people. But this cannot be normal. Is this a relationship that's worth it? I'm scared that I'm overreacting, but keep in mind that most of this is told from his perspective, as I don't remember that night. Yeah, pretty simple end to this episode then. Just not a person you want to have anywhere near your life. This is not someone that you even want to be friends with, let alone be boyfriends with. It's just clear as day. What a disgrace of a human this is. Ultimately though, at least you've learned a valuable lesson. This man thinks that you are worth less than $200 to him. Is that someone that you want to be in a relationship with? I don't think so. Get him gone. Well then guys, that is going to do it for this episode. r/relationship advice. Some pretty deep posts here with some strong and life-changing resolutions. But yeah, there we go. That is the nature of the sub. People in pretty perilous positions wanting real advice about their relationships. Get in the comments down below, guys. I want to hear your thoughts on all of these posts. What advice do you have for these people.